So the last time we did the subject of the dance of Purush and Prakriti. And in the dance of Purush and Prakriti, we explained how the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita is based on Sankhya philosophy. And there is Vedanta, but that is an additional add-on that comes above it. And I also explained in this section on dance of Purush and Prakriti that indeed we are infinitesimal fragments of the divine. And because we are infinitesimal fragments of the divine, we struggle with our own Prakriti, which includes our mind and five senses. Mamai vanso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manashasta indriyani prakriti stani karshati. We are struggling because Prakriti is all powerful, being the divine energy of God. Daivi asa gunamayi mama maya durataya mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam taranti te. That Prakriti is God's divine energy which we cannot overcome. But when we surrender unto God, when we surrender unto Krishna, then we can transcend the sufferings of Prakriti. So having understood this, you should know that the Prakriti does everything and Purush does nothing. That is, after hearing last time's lecture, many people ask me, Arey, but we do nothing, then why are we blamed for everything? What is my fault in this whole thing? First of all, you should understand that Prakriti does everything, Purush does nothing. Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. Very clearly Krishna says, Prakriti does everything, Purush does nothing. But Purush is bewildered and he imagines he is the doer. Therefore, karya karanam kartritve hetur prakriti uchyate. Purusha sukha dukhanam bhoktritva hetur uchyate. Then we come to the question that Prakriti does everything. But because of illusion, Purush thinks he is the doer and therefore he enjoys and he suffers. We've done this last time. I've also explained further that Purusha Prakriti stohi bhunte Prakriti jan gunan karanam guna sangasya sad asad yoni janmasu. And thus the Purush, he carries with him the subtle body, the subtle part of Prakriti. And he moves from one gross Prakriti to another womb, which gives him another gross Prakriti. And on the way, he comes across good and bad situations. So the question arises, and people have asked, is there no free will? Do I do nothing? Is there no choice in the matter? Am I locked into some kind of game where I have no say? And when I have no will, no free will, what is the point and the purpose of life? So this is why I thought that today we will cover the subject of free will and Prakriti. Where does free will come in? Where does divine Prakriti come in? And what exactly is our role? First and foremost, Krishna In the Bhagavad Gita, obviously, is telling Arjun not to throw down his weapons, get upon the chariot and fight. Which means that Arjun has a choice. He has a choice to pick up the weapons, or he has a choice to drop the weapons and not fight. I've done this earlier with you in the section on Karma Yoga and neuroscience, that we really have no free will. We don't have a willpower, but we have a want power. So let me recapitulate a bit of that so that you understand what is willpower and what is want power. Willpower comes from inert Prakriti. This has been actually studied in laboratories, initially in the 70s with crude experiments, and now more recently with the use of more sophisticated radio imaging, neuroimaging. And they have demonstrated that almost 6 seconds before you take an action, your brain has already decided that it is going to act. For example, you are on a diet, and on the table in front of you is a slice of delicious chocolate truffle cake. And seeing that beautiful, delicious chocolate cake in front of you, you're in a quandary. Do I have the free will to pick up the chocolate cake and eat it? Do I have that free will to reject it? And the answer, my friends, is you don't have that ability to reject it. You don't have the ability to choose it, rather. You have the ability only to reject it. For example, seeing the chocolate cake, already within your brain, your premotor cortex has become activated. Your motor cortex is becoming primed. And within 6 seconds, it has already made a decision to pick up the cake. And when your inert Prakriti has decided, when your dead brain, or let us say your live brain, but unconscious brain, has decided that it is going to eat the chocolate cake, then you make a conscious decision. Shall I pick up that cake? I think I'll take a chance this time and I'll eat this cake. One slice doesn't make much difference. And this tells us through radio imaging, through neuroimaging, that your willpower has already been activated. But it is activated, and before you actually pick up the cake, you have a gap of 6 seconds in which you can say no to the cake. So you do not have willpower, you have want power. Arjun could not choose that, yes, I want to be on this battlefield. He's already been driven there by circumstances, situations, by history, by numerous factors that are acting upon him. He's on the chariot facing the Kauravas. That willpower comes from Prakriti. But Arjun has the power to say no. He has the power to say, I am not going to fight. And because he says, I am not going to fight, he sits on the ground saying, I give up. The same way, whether it's a cigarette that you're reaching for, whether it's alcohol you're reaching for, whether it's drugs you're reaching for, whether you are reaching out to engage in illicit sexual activity, all of these are impelled by unconscious Prakriti. And this Prakriti has been programmed by your previous actions. Which in turn have been programmed by the association that you keep. And because of this, you are impelled to perform certain activities. But you have the choice. And you have the choice to say, no, I am not going to do it. So in these circumstances, we do nothing. Prakriti does everything. Prakriti engages because of its willpower. It impels you to act. You have only the choice or the independence to say, I won't do it. You don't have willpower, but you have won't power within the 6 seconds it takes for you to actually engage in that activity. Earlier, when cruder experiments were performed, we thought that it was in milliseconds. But now with more sophisticated neuroimaging, we have demonstrated that in fact, it takes fully 6 seconds until you say no. You have that choice of 6 seconds. So you see in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna that he has to say yes. He has to go ahead and he has to engage in activity. He has to perform his duty. That this war that is taking place by the will of God. And this will of God is acting through Prakriti. And because it is acting through Prakriti, including Arjuna's Prakriti, he is being driven onward towards that war. But because Arjuna has independence, because Arjuna has won't power, he is stating that, no, I won't. I'll not fight. I'll not kill my cousins. This is a choice which I want to make. So we see that actually the larger events of life, which are way out of Arjun's control, where Arjun has very little control over the big picture, the macro picture, the war has already taken place. In chapter 11, which is known as Vishwarupa Darshan Yoga, where Krishna gives Arjun Divya Drishti. And in chapter 11, Krishna gives Arjun Divya Drishti, reveals to him his cosmic universal form, and shows him that all the Kauravas are leaping into the mouth of death and they are dying. They're dying in flames. And then he explains in chapter 11, text 33, Tasmat tvam uttishta yasho labhasva, jitva shatrum bhungshasva, rajyam samriddham, mayayavite nihatah purvameva nimitta matram bhava savya sachin. Arise and attain honor, Arjun. Conquer your foes and enjoy prosperous rulership. These warriors who face you have already been killed by me. You will only be an instrument of my work, O expert archer. So in this 11-point 33, we begin to understand what our role is. Krishna explains to Arjuna that the larger events have already taken place. The defeat of the Kauravas has already taken place. Now you decide whether you want to defeat the Kauravas and become a hero, or you want to let somebody else take that role. So also, my friends, the larger events in your life have already taken place. And since the larger events in your life have already taken place, you have little or no choice in the larger events. You indeed, my friend, have no control over many things in life. And over the larger events of life, you have no control. But you have control over the smaller events of life. And specifically, you have a role over what role you are going to play. What role are you going to play? And that decision on what role you are going to play is determined by your choice. So we have the free will to perform the role that God has given us, or we have the free will to reject the role that God has given us. By rejecting the role God has given us, there are some consequences. And by performing the role that God has given us, we have other consequences. Therefore, what is the role of Prakriti and what is the role of Purush? And is there free will or is there no free will? Now imagine that Krishna, after telling Arjuna the whole Bhagavad Gita, he's completed the whole Bhagavad Gita. And having completed the entire Bhagavad Gita in chapter 18, verse 63, Krishna tells Arjuna, Iti te jnanam akhyatam guya maya vimrishayata dasheshena yathe chasi tatha kuru. What a wonderful statement. He says, I have already explained you everything in the Bhagavad Gita. 18 chapters I have explained to you. And having explained to you this knowledge that is more secret than all secrets, now think about it deeply. Think about it deeply. And having thought about deeply what the Bhagavad Gita is telling you, then you do exactly as you wish. Yatha ichhasi tatha kuru. So Arjuna has no role in deciding whether the lives of the Kauravas will be spared or not spared. That's already going to come to pass. And Krishna actually reveals this to him. He says, Vedaham samatitani vartmani cha Arjuna bhutani cha bhavishyani mam tu vedna kasyanaha. He says, I know the past, I know the present, I know the future of all living entities. But me, nobody knows. So therefore, Krishna is explaining to him that the larger events of life, the big canvas of life, the macro aspects of life over which you do not have control are already in motion by Prakriti. You are a cog in the wheel. You have a role to play in this large master plan of God. And when you have this large this small role to play in this large master plan of God, there you have a choice whether you listen to God's will and let your Prakriti act according to what God wants. But you have the veto power so that you can have your Prakriti refuse to do what you don't want it to do. So there is the willpower comes from Prakriti. The want power comes from you, the Purush. Therefore, my friends, what is your role? Your role is to surrender to God. And what do we mean by surrender? Often people think that surrender is passive surrender, where you simply lie down and let people walk over you and let life walk over you. That is not surrender. The real surrender is listening to God in your heart and fulfilling your duty. Means allowing your Prakriti to be engaged in what it is destined for and fulfilling the obligations of your duty which God has set through your Prakriti. So whatever duties God has given you as a husband, as a wife, as a son, as a father, as an employee, as a businessman, as a professional, those duties you must perform. And all you need to do for that is to surrender to God and let your Prakriti act according to the will of God. The only sin is not to listen to God and not to act. Still, God is so kind because his relationship between you and God, the relationship between you and God, is the relationship of love. And love can only exist if there is a choice. Therefore, God always gives you a choice. And that choice is to refuse to do what God wants you to do. And that indeed is the dilemma that is faced by Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Should he fight or should he not fight? The war is already fought in the future. In the future, the Kauravas are already dead. The question is Arjuna willing to contribute by performing his duty? And still Krishna says, Yatha ichhasi tatha kuru. So what, my friends, what is your job? Your job is simply first to silence the other voices in your heart so that you can hear the still, small, silent voice of God which is in your heart. Krishna says, Sarvasya chaham hridi sanvishto mata smritir jnanam apahanam cha. Vedaischa sarver aham eva vedyo vedanta krit vedagvid eva chaham. This is in 15.15. And Krishna says, I am seated in everyone's heart. From me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. This is so important. God is in your heart. And because God is in your heart, he gives you knowledge and remembrance on what you need to do, what your duties are. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Ishvara sarva bhutanam hriday deshe arjuna tishtati. Brahmyan sarva bhutani yantrarudani maya. Krishna explains so beautifully. He says to Arjun, I am seated in your heart. God is seated in your heart. And He is directing you onward towards your destiny. And He says, surrender exclusively to Him with your whole being, O Bharat. By the Lord's grace, you will attain perfect peace and the eternal abode. Tam eva sharanam gaccha sarva bhavena bharata tat prasadat param shantim sthanam prakshashi shashvatam. So Krishna is explaining to him that God is in your heart. He is directing you onward towards your destiny. All you need to do is to surrender to the will of God. There is a verse which is actually from the Lakshmi Tantra but also quoted in the Hari Bhakti Vilas. It says, Anukulyasya sankalpo pratikulyasya varjanam rakshishyatiti vishwaso bhoktritva varnam tatha atma nikshepa karpanye shadvidha sharanagati. This is from Lakshmi Tantra and also is there in the later in the Hari Bhakti Vilas. Do perform those actions which God wants you to perform, and they will take you closer to Him. Don't perform those actions which are against the will of God, because they will take you away from Him. Have firm faith that God is protecting you. He is acting through Prakriti, He is protecting you. He is acting and He is the source of all protection. Don't imagine that anyone else is protecting you. Have an attitude of complete devotion and gratitude to God for His protection and His shelter. See everything in the world as belonging to God. And also see that everything in the world that's happening is happening by the will of God. And if you understand this, lose your sense of identity by remembering God and forgetting self. And if you do this, God will bestow His grace upon you. Tesham satatam yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te tesham evanukampartham aham ajnana jantamah nashamya atma bhavasto jnana deepena bhasvatah. For those who are striving to listen to me, to hear me, to reach me, I give them the intelligence by which to come to me. Seated in your heart with the shining lamp of knowledge, I give them the intelligence by which to come to me. With the shining lamp of knowledge, I destroy the darkness of ignorance. So there is only one thing God wants you to do. Remember Him and forget yourself. Because all these foolishness, this foolishness of not doing what God wants, giving up the world, abandoning your duties, all these come directly from the ego self. When you remember God and forget the ego self, when you sacrifice your sense of separateness and you let Prakriti perform all your duties to perfection as an offering to God, Om Tat Sat, you will be fulfilling the will of God. And while you always have the free will not to do your duty, not doing your duty will lead to more complications and more suffering in your life. So you can do your duty, attain peace, perfection in the supreme destination, or you can abandon your duty and you can get a different type of consequence. So you have no control over the macro aspects of life. You only have some control over your individual role that you play. You don't have free will in the sense that you don't have that force that impels you to act, that is provided by Prakriti, by God. But you have the independence not to act. You may not have willpower, but you have want power. So much so that after hearing the whole Bhagavad Gita, you can still be given choice by Krishna, which says, now do what you want. But our duty is to listen to God who's in our heart and to surrender to His will and His grace. Allow Prakriti to function unhampered, unheeded by our egoism that prevents us from acting. And by allowing our Prakriti to act according to its will without seeking the fruits of our labor, without desiring to be known as doers, without trying to magnify our separateness and understand that we are all but part of God. By doing so, we can attain peace, perfection, and the supreme destination. So with this, I will pause. If there are any questions, following hearing all this, please go ahead and ask the questions.
Yes, good morning, sir. The first question is, it is said that we must have strong willpower to say no to indulgence. So is it same as the want power?
Yes, it is own power, not willpower.
Sure. So another question is the want power also governed by our prarabdha karma?
Own power is your choice. It's your choice. It's not governed by anything except your independent choice. You have the choice to eat the chocolate cake or not. You have the choice to have that drink or not. You have the choice to take that cigarette or not. You have the choice to reach for those drugs or not. You have that choice to perform your duty or not to perform your duty. That choice is there. That choice is independent.
Sure, sir. So moving to next question. So in today's era where everything and everyone are under the influence of Prakriti, so how one can really choose the want power even if they want to?
People are choosing own power every day. Every day you find people not doing their work. Every day you find people who are not doing their duties. Every day you find a husband neglecting his wife or wife neglecting the husband or parents neglecting their children or children not doing their duty towards their parents. So all the time we are seeing people who are exercising that own power and not doing what they're supposed to be doing. If they simply did what they're supposed to be doing by surrendering to the will of God, automatically life would be a far more wonderful place for everybody, especially for them.
Sure, sir. The next question is how to identify our main gunas?
How
That's
to
the
identify?
how to identify our main gunas? What is our main gun? How can we identify that?
I don't want you to identify your gunas. I've said this before and I'm saying it again. Don't get confused and try to think, am I in Tamagun, am I in Rajagun, am I in Sattvagun? How can I move from this gun to the other gun? This is stupidity. This is people who have not understood Bhagavad Gita. Krishna clearly says that you have to transcend the gunas, become gunatita. The gunas themselves are perfect. Tamagun is meant for you to rest, to be lazy, to sleep when your body needs rest. Rajagun is required for activity. Sattvagun is required for harmony. When you identify with these gunas, then all the problems start. But when you engage in worshipping God continuously, when you are engaged in bhakti yoga, bhakti yogena sevate sa gunam samatite tan brahma bhuya kalpate. When you are engaged in devotional service, remembering God, forgetting self, doing your duty, then you transcend the gunas. The gunas have no effect on you because you are Purush and not Prakriti. Only idiots are bothered about gunas. Am I this guna? Am I that guna? Hey, you are now in Tamagun. Hey, you are now in this gun. This is stupidity. People who don't understand Bhagavad Gita. You have to transcend the gunas.
Sure, sir. So with that, moving to our next question. So many people on the name of God say it is not their free will, but God is making them do things. And in the name of God, they also perform many malicious acts. And so how true is it saying that we do not make our choices, but our Prakriti is making us do things or act accordingly?
Prakriti is indeed your Prakriti is programmed by your choices. You keep the company of alcoholics and stay with them every day in the evening. You will become alcoholic. That's your choice. To go to that bar every day and mix with those people every day, or sit in their house every day and drink with them every day. This is your choice. And then when you become alcoholic, your Prakriti will force you to take alcohol. So that's your choice. Don't blame your Prakriti for it. Your earlier choices have determined your current choices.
Sure, sir. So these are questions for today, and we will be seeing next week, taking more questions.
All right. Hari Om, Jai Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.